Thomas, take it away.
Hey, thanks actually for preempting that I'm from Switzerland. That makes it much easier to. Am I live? Yes, I'm live. So welcome to AppDynamics, welcome to AppSphere, and welcome to Paradise. Because with AppDynamics, we do hit the easy button and all application problems are solved. Yay. Okay, not so fast. Yes, AppDynamics is the closest thing to an easy button you can find, but easy is a four-letter word. And application performance management, or APM, as a discipline, doesn't lend itself very well to easy or simple solutions. Ignoring this will create headache, will lead to more work for your team, and eventually will leave value on the table. Or even worse, you get stuck with someone like me showing up to help you with your problems. So what's the answer if you do not want that my ugly face shows up on your doorstep? I have today 10 best practices which really could help. I challenge you today to evaluate and consider how these best practices can help you really going forward with AppDynamics and your APM solution. The benefit will be that you will have a faster start, better ongoing productivity, and first and foremost, a higher application intelligence, or App IQ, how we call it today, which is what you wanted to begin with. And you also have the confidence that you made a wise investment. But before I start, let me quickly share our legal notices. Gives also some time for the last people to sit down. So what's the agenda today? I group these best practices in 3 groups: people, product, and process. As we heard, my name is Tom, and I'm working now 5 years for AppDynamics in various roles. And these best practices are actually distilled from my experience working with many, many customers across different industries. However, these best practices have not a hierarchical structure or a precedence over each other. Look at them like a chocolate box. You get a chocolate box, you open it, you read the content, and then you start picking out the chocolates until the box is empty. So let's start with the people domain. People are the foundation of everything we are going to do. And AppDynamics addresses many different users across your company, directly or even indirectly. So we want to consider them, how we enable them and adopt them. That is one goal basically of the people dimension. So let's jump right away into the first best practice. Number 1, set an APM strategy. As Franklin Covey, the famous time management company, says, for every 1 minute you put in planning, you will get 5 minutes during execution. Too often I come to customer and the plan is to roll out the agents, and then let's see and hope. Hope is not a strategy, and the plan, I ask you to think a bit bigger. To illustrate this and to wake everybody up, I would like to make a little exercise, so please everybody rise, get out of your seat, and let's be sure that you have some space around you, because I ask you to close your eyes, and once you close your eyes, point to true north. Close your eyes and point to true north. Please everybody point to true north. And now keep pointing and open your eyes. What do you see? Do we all agree? Do we all know where to march to? A strategy. You can sit down, thank you very much. A strategy is actually your true north. It's the marching order for everybody, and everybody knows where we are going. Without a strategy, actually, AppDynamics becomes a tool, and the strategy makes out of a tool a real solution. So I start typically, or the most important things I highlight here in red. I will not go through all the bullet points. It's more for your considerations. But the most important, you start, of course, with your status quo. You analyze your status quo, and then you define a vision. It does not have to be super elaborate. You do not have to work 5 days on a vision. But have a vision, have a goal. And the better upper management and the implementation team is aligned, the better, or that's the goal actually here. Set your priorities within your company, identify dependencies, and come up with a plan. This is the first step for a strategy. But again, other important consideration also maybe is the SDLC. Where do I install which product of AppDynamics across the life cycle from dev test to production, and again, the timeline and priorities. The strategy will be not a dead document and should not be locked up in a closet and collect dust. It should be internally visible to all people interested to, and this brings me to best practice number 2. Share internal knowledge. And the straightforward way to do this is to do a wiki. I highly recommend that you put the wiki. And you start, for example, with the strategy and the solution architecture of your solution, which you define at the very beginning of your project and implementation. And if you didn't do it along the way, it's never too late, as I say, for a happy childhood. So, however, what comes on top, what else comes in a wiki? In a wiki, you put links, internal links to subject matter experts, to example configuration or success stories, how some teams could help to solve some problems. You have external links to AppDynamics, to our doc base, to our knowledge base, our university videos, and last but not least, of course, to our support system. We encourage that you as customer can easily open support tickets and communicate with us. One important aspect of a wiki is the onboarding and the enablement. You will have new teams who want AppDynamics. As an owner of AppDynamics, you do not want to answer 5 times or 100 times the same questions. Make kind of an FAQ onboarding process. These are the steps if you want to get instrumented with AppDynamics. Or if you have new team members who want to enable themselves and learn about AppDynamics, give them a chance or give them a quick summary where they can start. So naming conventions are other things you can document, but the more advanced use cases are playbooks. And I want to talk a bit about playbooks and could come into a wiki. This is a real-world example from a real-world customer I was working with actually many years back, but it's still very valid. That's true enablement internally for your users. The question was, you have a high response time. Now what? How do we triage? And the process here, the suggested process, and it still works after all these years, you start with looking at your nodes, you're looking at your BTs, then you go on and look at the external backends or remote services, and then you go more into infrastructure-related metrics until you triaged and solved and find the problem and found the root cause. Let's move on to number 3. Define KPIs. If you don't know what you should measure, you don't know your status. In AppDynamics, you will have at least 100,000 metrics. The larger customer have a couple of million metrics. Not every of these metrics are equal. Some are more equal, and we definitely want to know them and define them to track progress. A KPI or a key performance indicator actually helps you see how you make progress or regression, and yesterday we heard the fancy word micro-regression. Which of your metrics eventually show micro-aggression, now I fall into it, micro-regression. Which of these KPIs are leading indicators to a problem? Traditionally, we think of APIs as CPU or thread pool or messages in a queue. With AppDynamics, probably these are not our main KPI. Our obvious choice for good KPIs are the business transaction themselves, and I will talk later about the business transaction and the importance of business transaction. So business transaction, the load, the average response time, or the percentiles, the error rate for business transaction would make excellent KPI. But as we heard yesterday with the keynote, we definitely want to focus also on the business aspect. And AppDynamics, if you have analytics or not, we have also in the core product, we have capabilities to expose business metric. When you're a truck company, what is the average load of a truck? If you're a retail company, what is the average number of items in a cart? And if it drops or goes up, then you can correlate how the IT itself, your systems, contributed to this fact. So KPIs is definitely something very important. Don't think that you have to make now here 500 KPIs to start with. I always say it's better to have 5 or 10 KPIs to start and have a framework in place, and you can always add later and as you grow more mature. Having 500 and then don't stick to the 500 won't serve you well. Start small and get bigger. The whole best practice is always an iterative approach. You don't conquer Rome in a day. So now, as we have an idea how to enable, or at least some good ideas how we can facilitate the adoption of people, let's move on to the product. It's actually the most funny thing for us as techies, and we typically do emphasize only the product, but ... It's not the only. Before I dive deeper into the product, I also want to reiterate quickly about the principles of AppDynamics. As we heard yesterday, Jyoti, when he challenged back in 2008 the current state, how APM works and how the tools are supporting it, he was not happy. So he challenged the state and came up with something new. Back in the days, we called it the secret sauce. Nowadays, we call it App IQ and Business IQ and Flow IQ and all these good words. Fundamentally, what is for me the secret sauce are the flow maps. How are they created? The baselines and the snapshots in the core product. Understanding how these work technically and how these work together and how we do these things. So the keyword for the flow map is bytecode instrumentation of entry and exit points and correlation. That's how we make a flow map. The baselines, we just establish a historical normal of a time series to compare the actual time with the historical normal. And the snapshots are created by making thread dumps. So, but by really understanding this, you have a chance to really go for the strengths of AppDynamics. What typically does not work so well, especially if you replace a product with AppDynamics, that you try to map the old product or AppDynamics to the old product one-to-one. I did it in the old product like this, and now AppDynamics should do exactly the same. This will not work. What you gain with your old product is APM knowledge, and this you will keep, and eventually some processes to how to roll out. From a tool perspective, from a product, from a solution perspective, carve it out, the old one, and start from scratch. So let's move on to best practice number 4, and the first in the product. Click. Go with the flow. One could discuss now if this flow map is a complicated or a simple flow map, a nice flow map or an ugly flow map. The bottom line, it does not matter. We do not create flow maps. A flow map is defined ideally by applications which talks to one another. So everything what talks to one another should be in one application. Too often I see customers who want to avoid any kind of complicated flow map, and they rip the tiers apart into different applications just to make a simple flow map. We do provide you with functionality to slice and dice even the most complicated flow map. And the flow map is not chaotic as it looks, even a crazy one, and that's not even a crazy one, I saw much crazier flow maps. It's a strict hierarchical order based on your definition of a node and a tier and an application. So we have to first and foremost make sure that we use the term tier and application in the right way. And there is sometimes some confusion. The tier is typically what is for you an application, and what we call an application is typically an environment. So don't take apart what actually belongs to it together. The goal of a flow map is to show you the end-to-end view. When you put them in different applications, it's still complicated, the flow. It's just in different spots, and you have to click much more to get eventually the whole flow map. What I typically challenge when I come to customers, when I see 70 applications and 3 tiers in each application, I rather see the opposite, 3 applications with 70 tiers in them. From a high-level perspective, makes much more sense. So while a flow map might look noisy, and I'm happy if you have an eye for noisiness in an APM solution, because APM might be potentially noisy. Again, the flow map is not noisy. Strict hierarchical answer, but we do have noise potentially also with AppDynamics. And I really just also show you the famous haystack, because this is fundamental APM and traditional thinking that the more we have, the better the chance to find the needle. I think when we think of a haystack, just by adding more hay, can we find the needle solving the problem in a better way? I would challenge this also, this notion. So the idea is that AppDynamics wants to give you information and not noise. But it's also up to you, the user, how to configure the tool. Which brings me to best practice number 5. Configure signals from noise. As an example, I want to pick out here the business transaction. As the business transaction is the fundamental configuration artifact for AppDynamics. So I always spend a lot of time with my customers to make sure that the business transactions are good. However, they are easy to configure in a noisy way. And noise, as we learned, is not necessarily helpful to be quick and proactive and see the needle in the haystack. So the idea is that we group our haystack in smaller haystacks, more relevant haystacks, that we do not have to investigate all the haystacks, but group them in reasonable or in good haystacks. So what is the qualifier for a good business transaction or a business transaction? Again, think about the KPI. Not every transaction is for us a business transaction. Only the key transaction, or what we call then the business transaction, are real business transaction. The revenue generating transaction. The transaction which involve a lot of risk for your company if they fail. Changing the background color of a profile is probably not something what keeps you up at 3 o'clock in the night. Which transaction keep you up at 3 o'clock in the night? These are the business transactions. What we do with the rest, we are always scared that we don't measure all. So the idea is we start with top 5, and I often, of top 5 is really good starting number, or make it top 25 if you insist. But start with a low number of key transactions. Make sure these transactions are really identified one-to-one with a rule. So we have one rule getting one transaction. And all the rest we group into one big bucket called all other traffic. So we still measure all, we still see the errors and the outliers in this all other traffic. And at any point in time when we see an important transaction in this all other traffic, we can say, okay, we want to make out of this transaction a real first-class business transaction, but leave all the rest in the all other traffic. That is the best practice approach to configure business transaction. And as a little detail, yes, we do have limits, the 200 for the application and the 50 per node. A, they are all configurable, and B, make sure you do not hit the limits. As soon as you hit the limits, your business transaction detection is not anymore deterministic. And that's not what we want. We want to tell the tool what we want to see. And that's actually also how we avoid noise. Instead of, there are lots of good auto-discovery, but with business transaction, I like to oversteer every auto-discovery. I want to tell the tool what I want to see, because I know for a fact what is important. AppDynamics cannot know what is really important. It gives you good suggestions, but cannot know what is really important. So let's move on to the next best practice, number 6. Exercise your options. AppDynamics provides you many APIs and configuration screens in the UI to come up with a truly customized solution. Even though it doesn't take you 2 months to learn them, but they are still comprehensive as a framework, and I urge you to learn them. What I want to pick out today are actually the health rules to show you how we can take health rules to the next level. And the health rules, I will talk with you now in the following about 3 example health rules, which you might or might not reuse. It's an idea how you can bring them, how you can use health rule in a more powerful way. These 3 example health rules, or the idea with these 3 health rules is that we have any of these per tier. So we have a tier health. The first one goes specifically for one individual tier and checks all the metrics or the conditions there. And we use several conditions to check the health. And similar, we can use also on tier level the business transaction health, or if you want, so a service endpoint health, and then last but not least, also the infrastructure health. So by adding multiple conditions, we add much more power to these individual health rules. And as it's kind of a framework, we can easily make an automation, or even manually, if you're a smaller customer, copy and paste them to another tier. So that's, even though we have to make for each tier several health rules, it's still an easy task, and it's a very comprehensive approach to check the health of individual tiers. And again, remember, for us, a tier is basically an application. Health rules are the foundation of alerts typically, or we think of that. However, you see in my next example, we also may use them on dashboards. I don't know if you saw this example already in another presentation from United. I really think they are tremendous and good looking, not just good looking dashboards, but they really provide a lot of information. But what I want to focus you today are these little tiny spots which are traffic lights showing the status of a health rule. And these health rules use the logic I just showed you. So even though they are teeny tiny, they give you a comprehensive overview or health status of your application. So the idea, really, what I wanted to present here is with exercise your option, that with health rules, especially with health rules and dashboard, it's a very open framework if you want so, and you can really come up with tremendous solutions in the end. So after we looked at the people and the product, we need processes to align them. Our last dimension. Who of you takes security and privacy rather seriously? I guess everybody who did not make hand up is not really telling the truth. Definitely at AppDynamics, we do take your privacy and security very seriously. I forgot to switch, that's the next. Best practice number 7, secure your privacy. As I just said, at AppDynamics, we do take your privacy very seriously. So out of the box, we do not expose any PCI or PII relevant data. But we have, and I want to name these are 2 features which are extremely powerful and where you have to be a bit more careful configuring them. The 2 features are the method invocation data collector and the raw SQLs. The raw SQLs give you the full SQL string, including bind variables. Generally, I would caution you to use this feature in production because it's really showing all the time everything. In a pre-production environment, it might be a great feature. However, the method invocation data collector should be used heavily by everybody. The fundamental idea with the method invocation data collector, you have a slow transaction and you will want to know which customer was affected. Now you have 2 choices. Either you extract the customer name and your security officer will hit you for that, or you expose your client ID, which is for most customers perfectly fine to expose a client ID. So it shows the method invocation data collector has tremendous power, but with this power comes responsibility. And the solution to this issue or problem, it's a good problem to have actually, is using our role-based access control wisely. You have 2 groups of people fundamentally. One group, and it's probably a small group, can change this feature in production and can use this feature in production and can configure them. And the vast majority of your users cannot change or configure role-based access control and raw SQLs in a production environment. Let's move on to best practice number 8. I worked once with a guy and he said all his team members are fantastic, they are really lazy, and therefore they automate everything when they have to do it the second time. And I think that's really the spirit of us all engineers. So I do highly recommend that we automate as we go along. And we start with the automated agent deployment. Whenever you have 10 or 20 agents, please use or do automate the agent deployment. Even during the year, even during major releases, we come up with enhancement of the product. If you do not have an automated rollout, you will not use them or you will not upgrade, and sooner than later you fall hopelessly behind not using our newest features and technologies. So please really automate your agent deployment. Even with the unified agent, as we heard yesterday, it's excellent that we have it, but you still have to work around or come with your own deployment process for the unified agent. It simplifies it, but it does not take the necessity away from to automate it. If you're an on-prem customer, monitor your controller. Every controller out of the box comes with self-monitoring capability and can be accessed out of the box. We give you more configuration items on request to make a better monitoring. However, we do not expect that you really actively troubleshoot the controller. But if you look at high-level KPI for our controller, you figure out fast if the performance slows down. and our support can quickly help you based also on the data from the controller monitoring. A more advanced use case, or the more mature you get, and the more mature customers are doing this, they will automate the configuration deployment. So a developer sets a BT in a dev environment, and with the push of a button, it gets migrated to a test environment and to a production environment. And last but not least, we want to reuse information from AppDynamics within other tools. The obvious choice is here forwarding, and you have two choices, pulling or pushing, forwarding the events, the alerts, into a central event management system. So automation is key the more mature you get, but again here, start small and grow as you go. Number 9, collaborate. Some early customers even called us a collaboration engine. And as I said in the very beginning, AppDynamics will serve many different users across many different teams with different backgrounds. And AppDynamics is the bridge between them. And unfortunately, too often I see that people just take a screenshot of a problem they don't understand and send it around the company to some other guy. How should this guy analyze based on a screenshot? Two possibilities. Either you take the URL in the browser directly, or we have even a feature called deep links, where you can set the time frame, where you can have a fixed time frame and send fundamentally a URL around. So the person can take on where you left off. It's the easiest way to start collaboration, and if you do share the URL, you just enabled your colleague. So what's the last and the 10th best practices? The last of the 10 best practices. Actually, I don't have any. As you heard often now talking to during my speech, I like simple things. However, we have to be careful not to cut corners. So I like a simple business transaction detection, but we cannot cut corners with the strategy. And quoting Einstein always makes me look clever, so I just like the quote in general. So keep things simple, but don't make it simpler. In summary, I do recommend these 9 best practices to help your IPM solution. I really challenge you and ask you to consider what you have done so far and what these best practices can do for you going forward. The benefit will be that you have a stronger start, better ongoing productivity, and first and foremost, a higher app IQ. Thank you very much. Right, just give me, before I go on to the Q&A, which just comes, please give us feedback. If you liked it, my name is Tom again. If you didn't like it, my name is Billy. So, but please give us feedback. It's highly appreciated if you give us feedback, but I'm definitely open now for questions.
Great, Thomas. Questions? Eric? Another question? We'll get ready for the next one.
It's good. I solved all problems.
In number 7, you had mentioned lockdown security about the SQL parameters. Is there no way to actually mask that data instead of just not doing it at all?
There are some masking of other potentially confidential data. We can mask in other parts of the tool. We can mask passwords and stuff like this. If you want to mask the raw SQL, then don't expose it in the first place. So there are actually 3 choices. The number 1 is you make it application-wide, and then you have everything, all database, all SQL. And this is not a production feature. It's just too much information on many levels. You can set it up per node. So at least it's only on one node, and the security and potential overhead from this is restricted to one node. However, what I really do prefer, if you really want where name equals John and you want the name, that you make a data collector. And then you have surgically extracted the information you want. It's perfectly defined. It's not more and not less. And go with it. In a production system, I do prefer the data collector. The raw SQL is really your last resort. If your house burns in production and you have no other way, then you turn it on.
Is there a way to audit who has done raw SQL and maybe what they pulled up?
Not from a result perspective. We do have an audit table, and you do see who logged in and who changed when and what. So that's actually a very good point. I like to tell my customers to tell their developers, you can do raw SQL or method invocation data collector, but we watch you. We know who does when what, and we do have this.
Where would you find that deep link you're pointing?
It's actually, I think, under the question mark. Either it's under the gear in the upper, I never know, it's in the upper left, upper right corner in the UI, and there you have a gear. Either it's under the gear or it's under the question mark. It's one of these.
Other questions?
And actually, in the snapshot itself, you have a, oh no, it was stripped from this slide, but in the snapshot itself, you have a little keychain or a little link where you have this when you open a snapshot. There is a distinct logo.
Going once? Here we go.
You talked about BTs. If we, on a single transaction, want to process post-screen data and then pre-screen data, how would you recommend going about doing that?
I'm not sure if I really understand your problem, but
okay. Yeah, so if a user clicks on a continue button, or let's say there's a tree to jump around in the flow.
Yeah.
If they click somewhere on that tree, they're going to need to, let's say they need to process post data for the screen they're on. And then they need to process pre-screen data for the screen they're going to. So we have two separate actions going on in the same transaction from a user perspective. How would you recommend monitoring those separately? Because otherwise you could have a very large number of actual BTs.
In general, if this is a critical step to understand, with a lot of processing involved and basically revenue generating, every request which hits the server will be a transaction or a business transaction itself, or will be grouped into one of the other business transactions. The choice if you group these two transactions together in one overall transaction, or if you could keep them separately, really depends on how important they are. If they're highly important, you keep them separate. If it's not the most crucial step, then you put them potentially either together in a business transaction or even in the all other traffic. So the question really comes down on priority, how you manage transaction. High priority have their own line in the UI. Less important are grouped together.
Any more questions?
Excellent. We have a fast break or a longer break, but
Eric?
one more question.
Right over here. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, just detail maybe. You mentioned the ranks about 5 to 25 at the most business transactions. Would that be for a single application or across the entire enterprise?
Typically, I would say a business transaction is technically speaking an entry point. And within an application, with an AppDynamics application, we might have several tiers which serve as entry points. So I would say 5 to 25 per tier. So I had once a customer who had legitimately something like 500 or 600 business transactions within an application. But that was a long time ago, and probably nowadays I would also challenge it much more. The idea, I don't say you have only the right for 5 or 25, but start with the low-hanging fruit. Start with what really keeps you up at night. And then you always can add more. If you have legitimately 2,000, we have to find a way how to make 2,000 within a business, within one application. So I do not want to restrict you on the upper level. I just want to question if these 2,000s are really. Actually, I forgot to tell you my litmus test for a business transaction. If you have a business transaction which is not used for an alert or a dashboard, it's not a business transaction because it does not keep you up at 3 o'clock in the night. A business transaction is something you want a distinct alert on it when it goes slow. So when your checkout doesn't work, the whole company will run. And I once a travel agency, and they said whenever the revenue is not $1,000 per minute, we have a problem, and everybody runs. So these kind of scenarios, basically business transaction, or making it on a big dashboard. And if you don't have this situation, then probably you can leave it in the all other traffic, because in the all other traffic, we can still make troubleshooting. The slowest call will still show up in the all other traffic, and we still see the errors, and we see then the individual flow map for the transaction, which are slow and very slow. So we can make troubleshooting with the all other traffic. We lose some granularity, but we have still tremendous value with it. When you have a list of 200 business transactions, it's just too much, mostly for our brain to consume. And who sits 24/7 in front of a 200 list and watches business transactions? So again, that's why I urge you to start with 5 or something like this. If you need more, you have more.
Any other questions? All right, let's give one last round of applause for Thomas. That was great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.